President Biden is relieved that no one was injured after a 19-year-old drove a box truck into a fence near the White House late on Monday. Let's watch some of the press conference.
Thus far, he's relieved that no one was injured last night and grateful to the agents and the law enforcement officer who responded so quickly.
Meanwhile, new details are emerging about the suspect. According to court documents reported by CNN, 19-year-old Sai Varshith Kandula of Chesterfield, Missouri, praised Adolf Hitler to investigators after his arrest and said that he aimed to kill the president if necessary to overthrow the government and install himself in power. In an interview after the arrest, investigators asked Kandula about the Nazi flag. The 19-year-old said he bought the flag because, quote, Nazis have a great history, that he admires their, quote, authoritarian nature, eugenics, and their one world order. Investigators also wrote that when asked if he looks up to any leaders, Kandula answered Hitler because he was a strong leader.
According to CNN, former high school classmates of Kandula described him as quiet and someone who didn't get into trouble. A former classmate of his at Marquette High School said he was a, quote, good dude who never got in trouble and never made a scene in school because he was plotting his overthrow of the U.S. government and self-installation as our new fearless leader. Yeah, so the interesting thing about the story now is I'm seeing a lot of people on Twitter. No one of note, as far as I can tell. This is just randos. Again, it's hard to tell now that anyone can buy a blue check. But people suggesting it's a false flag because of how, I guess, easily and obviously the Nazi flag was displayed. I don't know, suggesting that this has been planted or arranged by law enforcement, which there's no evidence of that so far in this case. I'm not, except for they're saying basically the circumstances are suspicious because they're so not suspicious.
Right.
They're like everything is exactly as you would expect it to be.
Here's one of those tweets from someone saying that the driver has been named. Democrats aren't even trying anymore. You couldn't find one white racist guy to do this when your party is full of white racist guys. So this is a refrain that we've seen a lot, that there's something very lazy.
If it was a setup, why wouldn't they find a white racist?
Right, exactly. It cuts both ways.
That's what you'd expect. So we didn't do it.
It's like Princess Bride.
The wine in front of me. Yes, it's exactly like that.
And it's honestly hard to tell.
You can reason your way into thinking anything if you go down that line. But look, is absolutely true that law enforcement connects with lonely young people. There was a long history of doing this to young Muslim men and saying, hey, do you hate the U.S.? You should. Would you like to buy some weapons? And then they arrest them. Like, that does happen. Mm-hmm. Could it have been the case? Sure, if there's some evidence that they had some previous contact with him or some awareness of his plan or it helped push him toward making a plan. Look, I'd be perfectly willing to believe that was something that has happened. It's happened a million times. It happens all the time. I've said on the show repeatedly, I've done radars on it, on how the Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping plot was substantially motivated by the FBI. You're not crazy, you're not a conspiracy theorist to know that law enforcement does these kinds of sting operations where it entraps people, it sets people up for terrorism, for sexual contact. Sometimes we all remember To Catch a Predator, that kind of stuff. But we need some. It's okay to be skeptical in general. You need some kernel of a reason to operate on a skeptical notion, and just that, it looks suspicious because it's not suspicious, but isn't that suspicious, and then I'm suspicious. That's not a healthy way.
Yeah, I do think this is, ripe for investigation, but at this point there isn't anything dispositive or really any evidence at all that would suggest that this was a setup.
Sure. But was he known to law enforcement previously is a totally legitimate question to ask. It's a question we found out that in a lot of the cases of mass shooters that they were known to law enforcement, even the FBI. That is an appropriate question to ask. Did the FBI or anyone else in law enforcement know of some danger, some threat? Because often family members and friends, now in this case so far it says everybody thought he was a quiet, normal kid. But in a lot of cases, family and friends, they speak up. We're supposed to see something, say something. People see something and they say something, and the tips are just ignored.
Yeah, I was going to say that there's a lot here that we're waiting to hear from. We haven't heard anything about the parents yet, I don't believe. We haven't heard anything about how he got from Missouri to Washington, D.C. Did he drive the U-Haul the whole way?
No. So I think I did just see that information. It looks like he got a one-way plane ticket. He flew. He landed at, I think, Dulles. And then he rented the U-Haul there.
Yeah,
That's
landing at Dulles was his first mistake.
Yeah, no wonder he was driven to a maniacal rage after that.
Now, to be clear,
we kid.
Yeah,
and we can only kid because no one got hurt, and it's all
Yeah,
fine.
right.
So I don't mean to make light of a potentially dangerous situation.
The part of the story that people find to be both suspicious in terms of it being a false flag and also cutting the other way insofar as if Democrats were invested in a narrative of white supremacy, why would they pick an Indian kid, an American kid to do this? People have been talking about some interesting characteristics of how Hitler and Nazism are discussed or embraced in some weird niche ways in India. And of course, this kid is Indian American. Who knows how much this would have influenced him at all. But ironically, a couple of days ago, a post from LinkedIn went viral. It was posted by an associate director of risk advisory at Deloitte, called Friday Inspiration. And in it, he says he recently picked up a book on Adolf Hitler. This is an Indian American guy or an Indian guy. It's unclear from the post. Recently, I picked up a book on Adolf Hitler, The Dark Charisma of Adolf Hitler by Lawrence Rees. I always wanted to read about Hitler in World War II. He goes on talking about it. And then says some impressive qualities of Hitler were, and then he lists them off: charismatic, visionary, magnetic speaker, extremely confident, very intellectual, massive action taker, woof. And so notably, this got
He's a hustler.
Dragged.
Hitler hustled.
Sure. This post got dragged for obvious reasons. The guy issued an apology, but as a consequence, people then have been raising, like, well, where does this come from? And apparently, there is this history of Mein Kampf being a bestseller in India. Mike, the magazine, did a profile of this back in 2015. Apparently, copies have been selling increasingly over the years. It's hard to get exact numbers, but a number of companies have chose to use Hitler in their branding, like an ice cream company. And there are some geopolitical reasons why there was some solidarity and some political movements with Hitler, because he was perceived as being anti-England, anti-colonialism. India is obviously having, it's like my enemy's enemy is my friend kind of a situation. Certainly. And, I'd be interested to hear more if people do any more reporting about this. Obviously, Indians are considered to be Aryan, not to Hitler in all likelihood, but in kind of like classical race science textbooks and things like that. So I don't think it's the most wild thing to think that there might actually be some logic, to think that there's logic behind anybody's racism and hatred and white nationalism or whatever it ends up being. But there might be a narrative here that makes sense internally to someone who obviously is not making good decisions and is potentially disturbed and motivated by things that aren't very logical to the broader population. So I'd be interested in hearing more about that as well.
Have you ever watched any of those funny videos, the downfall videos? It's Hitler, and it's a film about like the fall of the last days of Hitler or something, and it's him it's an actor playing him screaming at his subordinates for this movie, Downfall. But it's in German, so then there's subtitles, and you can edit the subtitles to make it sound like he's screaming at his subordinates about anything. There's some really funny ones. It goes on for like 10 minutes, him just shrieking in unintelligible German at people about the war situation and how the Americans and the British and the Russians are closing in on him, but you could make it about like literally anything.
I think
you did not put enough coffee creamer in my coffee today, Brianna.
Right, okay, I think I have to do that. And look, parody and making fun of Hitler and Nazism, it was something that helped people feel resilience in the context of the war. Famous satirists were targets of Nazis, and there was very much not free speech because there was a recognition that by making someone seem foolish, you can strip them of their power and start to crack through their authority over the state and their presumed authority that they have wrested through authoritarian machinations. And it's why there's such a celebration of satire, and why people love Springtime for Hitler and producers and that kind of literature. And there is an interesting question to be asked, what is being gained from such the extreme popularity of a book like Mein Kampf? on the other side of that, which is obviously not satirical, as autobiographical, and how concerned should we be about the rise of that book's popularity anywhere? That's not a call to ban it or anything like that, obviously, but what does that mean about trends, and should we be more concerned about whether there is an actual rise in this kind of ideology? We'll have to see what investigators find out more about this case. Of course, we'll be following it. We'll have more Rising for you after this.